So we're going to take a look at how we can use the if statement in our Python code now to do different things depending on what has happened earlier in your code. So the code that we have here right now, if we run it, says your cart's $50, enter your discount code. You can type in anything you want at this stage and it will always say thank you for your purchase. So what are we going to do in order to handle that situation of taking the discount code and checking whether it's correct or not? The first thing we're going to do is we are going to assign the result of that input using the equal sign or the assignment operator that we learned about before. We're going to assign that into a variable. Okay, so we're going to call this maybe just code. Okay, so the variable, remember, is the manila envelope that we saw during the role play, and then the name of the variable, in this case code, is going to be what's written on that manila envelope. Okay, so they're going to take whatever the user typed in and put it into the code variable, and then underneath this we are going to use this new keyword called if, and the if keyword is what Python is going to use to check to see whether something is true or not, and then act appropriately depending on whether that situation was true or not. So we're going to start off with if, and then we're going to type the word code, and in this case code is going to be that variable. Okay, so it's going to look inside that variable or that envelope with the word code on it, look inside it, see whatever data's inside it, and then we're going to type in 2 equals sign. Okay, so that's different to the single equal sign that we saw up on line 2. The 2 equal signs is used to compare both sides of that sign to see whether the contents inside it are the same. Okay, so we've taken a look at the variable code, we're going to look inside it, and then we're going to compare it to the actual word, let's say save 50. Okay, let's imagine that is the code that we're looking for. Okay, so here it's checking whether the contents inside the code variable is the same as save 50. Notice in this case we have the quotation marks around that specific code that we're looking for. We do not have quotation marks around the variable. We always end if statements in Python with a colon. Okay, so that's just that symbol there. And then after we've done that, when we press enter, you'll notice that Python has actually given us some spaces. It has automatically inserted spaces into our code there. So if you remember all the way back to lesson 2, putting spaces in front of lines of code may cause problems. Okay, but in this case, it's actually needed. In this case, the spaces that Python puts in front of the code is saying that the line of code that follows is optional. And it's optional depending on the result of the if statement above it. Okay, so only if this statement is true do we then go in and do this line of code that's indented. So in this case, if the code is save 50, we are going to display your updated cart. Let's say that's $25. Okay, and then it will finish and go to line 5, which is not indented, which means it will always run regardless of whether the if statement was true or not. So let's just test this by stepping through the code so you can see how Python flows through it. Let's step through this. I'm going to close off the window there. Click next. You can see the print displayed on the screen. Click next. It's going to say enter your discount code. Now if we type in, let's say the wrong code, okay, let's say 1234, that's not the code, and we press enter, you can see Python now moves to line 3. So what do you think is the next line of code that Python will run after line 3? Will it go to line 4 or will it go to line 5? Have a guess. I'm going to click next now. You can see that it's wrong, so it actually skips line 4, okay? Because that if statement is false, so it skips any lines of code that are indented and underneath it, okay? So indenting just means that the line of code has been pushed in, okay? So it's going to go to line 5 and it's going to display thank you for your purchase. So let's run that again, but let's type in the correct code, step through this one line at a time, enter the discount code, let's type it in correctly, say 50, press enter. Okay, we've reached line 3. What do you think the next line of code is? Let's try it. It actually does go into line 4 because in that case, the if statement is true. So then we display your updated cart is $25. So we'll display that and then it will still go to line 5 because line 5 is not indented, it's not pushed in. It will always run after the if statement is done. So that's how we can use the if statement to do something differently when the variable does contain the value that we're interested in. A couple of things I'd like to call out here is, let's just run this at full speed. You'll notice that when we get the chance to type in information to the input function, like say 50, okay, it's pressed right up against the colon there. It can be common for students to automatically press a space and type in their text like that, just because they like the formatting. But the problem with that is anything that you type after the cursor will be absorbed into the variable, okay? So if they run this and they press enter after typing space 50, it actually doesn't match save 50 because save 50 doesn't have the space in it, okay? So I'll just step through that one more time. Let's say they type space and then save 50, press enter, okay? When it gets to line 3, that will actually be false because the code variable doesn't have save 50. It actually has space save 50. Okay, so it's important that whatever we type into the input function after the cursor is stored into the variable. So the way we can fix that or make it a little bit more user-friendly is instead of having the user press space, we can just put a space after the colon in the prompt. Okay, so by doing that, and running the code, you can see that the space has been inserted in the prompt, and then they can type in whatever they like without needing to put in that extra space to make it look a bit better. Okay, so now they've just typed in save 50 without the space, and it will work because it does match the value we are looking for. So one other thing we want to cover here with the input function is that it is case sensitive. Okay, so we're looking for save 50, that's the code we're looking for. So if we run this now and I type it in all caps like that, it's not going to work, okay? So I press enter, it's going to say thank you for your purchase. It's going to skip past line 4 because when we use the double equal signs, it's going to do an exact match between what the user typed in and is stored inside the variable and the piece of text that we put inside the quotation marks. So just keep that in mind when you are using input functions and comparing them to specific values.